Howdy, howdy! We are live on a Friday night with yet another new episode of Star Trek Discovery to discuss, and this was a big one. It was a pretty dense episode. Some might even say bloated, but some might also say packed with a lot of good stuff too. So I think it's going to be a lot to delve through. And Dave, we should go ahead and get the show started.
Yeah, let's hit it, man.
All right, I'm Fatheree,
This is Dave.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 284th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast. And tonight I'm sorry, I messed up my intro. What is it? We're the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, right?
Yeah, that sounds like us.
Okay, that sounds right. Okay. Take it from the top. The beauties of doing things live. Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 284th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas. And tonight, we are talking about Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episode 5, Mirrors, written by Johanna Lee and Carlos Cisco, and directed by Jen McGowan. And before we get started, I do need to give a big thank you and shout out to the Tex-Trek Patreon supporters who make the weekly live show possible. So thank you so much, Starfleet Sohel, Cake is Eternal, Crazy Dutchie, Joanne Robertson, John Daw, Geek Filter, Quarkspar, Stephanie Durantes, Matthew Averett, Braxton, Chuck A, Joel Vallis, Benginium, and our anonymous supporters. Y'all are in luck because we're going to do a lot of celebrating with our patrons in the month of May. We're going to have multiple watch parties on Saturdays in the Tex-Trek Discord server to celebrate the birthdays of some Bridge Crew level Patreon supporters. So the first one up is going to be Braxton's birthday. We're going to be celebrating it shortly on May 4th. So may the 4th be with you. We're going to be watching a couple DS9 episodes, instead of that other Star franchise. So that sounds like a pretty cool Saturday to me. And you'll still have plenty of time to, do your other Star franchise celebrations, I think, if you celebrate that holiday. So, yes, sign up on the Tex-Trek Patreon. You can come in as little as $2 a month. That'll get you into the monthly watch parties. We also have Sohel's birthday, Joel's birthday, and Aaron's birthday. So we're going to be watching a lot of Star Trek at our watch parties in May.
I can't believe these people are going to make us watch Star Trek.
I know, right? Such a tough life we live, watching Star Trek with friends all the time. It's just torture. But
Actually, Father, you know what this is? This is your oh my God, what do they call the thing that Soren was trying to get to in Generations?
The Nexus?
This is your Nexus, actually, Father. You're in the Nexus right now.
No, I'm not.
Okay, sorry. We'll get your job removed from it later on.
This world would not exist if
We're
in
fine-tuning
the
the Nexus, Father. It's got to start somewhere.
The Nexus is a piece of shit. If my life exists in the Nexus, actually, now that I think about it, I was just looking for the silver linings. But
when we're doing the watch-alongs, Father, you're in the Nexus.
But there's not really much news this week that comes to mind, so I got a lot to say on this episode. I think we just need to delve on in. I will say just like one little piece of news, I guess. I know a lot of people were sad to see the announcement that season 5 will be the end of Star Trek Lower Decks. We do have some ideas with some friends on how to push for ways to celebrate Lower Decks, but also ask for something more to continue the story with those characters. So that's something that we're going to be trying to make a big push for, something in May towards the end of the month. So we're going to have a lot more to say on that next week, I think. So stay tuned. But enough Lower Decks. Let's talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 5, Episode 5, Mirrors. I'm going to quickly recap it by reading the official synopsis, and then I'll expand on that with some spoilers. But the official synopsis reads, Captain Burnham and Book journey into extra-dimensional space in search of the next clue to the location of the Progenitors' power. Meanwhile, Rayner navigates his first mission in command of the U.S.S. Discovery, and Culber opens up to Tilly. That actually does a good job of summarizing everything, except it leaves out the big reveals of Maul and Locke, all the Breen stuff we get with Locke, but we really understand those characters' past and their motivation now, and it ends with the Disco crew getting the next piece of the puzzle, and Locke seriously injured, but on the run. So they got the Mirror Universe ISS Enterprise into the Prime Universe in the 32nd century. So that's a thing now. But that pretty much covers it.
I have lots of thoughts on that when we get to that specific thing. But it is wild to me that the description of the episode doesn't say, like, the Locke and Maul episode. Like, that's what it is. There's other stuff going on.
Yeah, the synopsis should have teased, like, Maul and Locke secrets reveal. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't want to know that. They put these out before the episodes air, so I wouldn't want to know that.
I guess that's true. That's true. Later on, when it's on, updated Paramount Plus descriptions or whatever.
I don't even read these. I never read the synopsis until I've watched it.
But you know what I'm saying? Like later
on,
other
people will read them.
When people are gonna want to just watch random episodes of Discovery 5 years from now, they should know it's the Locke and Maul episode.
Yeah, there should be. They should think of a way to code that where someone who's watched it won't be spoiled.
I mean, it's not saying what the deal is. You don't have to say what the secrets are. Just that we maybe something like the Locke and Maul stories intertwined with a visit to, the Mirror Universe or whatever. But yeah, Father, you gonna take lead on the thoughts on this one, or shall I?
Sure. Yeah, I can give the first opening statement, just kind of talking about our broad impressions on the episode, and then we'll get into the specifics later in the episode breakdown. But as far as my broad impressions, I think this episode, in some ways, it's the biggest episode since the season premiere, but also the most flawed episode of the season. But I'm going to start out by saying I did really like it. It checked multiple boxes for me, primarily finally giving me that substance with Maul and Locke. I believe I said last week, I think you asked me, Dave, if I was still enjoying those characters, and I said that I was, but I'm really needing more. So I feel satisfied with that. I feel like I got that now. More than satisfied. I really liked it, but I think what I wanted was just for like their foundation to finish being cemented in the first half of the season. I kind of wanted to like know their deal in the first half of the season, so I would understand them and kind of enjoy whatever's happening with them in the second half, if that makes sense. I think that's kind of my expectation, kind of my hope, and I feel like the show delivered on that, so that makes me happy. And I guess, right here we are at the halfway point. 5 episodes of the 10-episode season. And I find, Maul and Locke, they are insanely easy to empathize with. And there was a lot of clunkiness with this episode overall. It had a lot to juggle with the A story, with Burnham and Book versus Maul and Locke. Then you have, like, the B story with the Breen stuff, which was told in flashbacks and had to do a lot of exposition, and then there's like a C story trying to keep Rayner and the Disco crew involved in the episode, and we got Mirror Universe and nonlinear storytelling, and Kelleran and Breen both get some world building and fleshing out, so there was a lot going on. However, when compared to a lot of past Discovery, it honestly, I think, feels pretty graceful in my opinion, and the episode did make me cry. So I always try to give a shout out to the Star Trek stories we discuss that get a big emotional reaction out of me. And, I'm kind of an easy mark with Star Trek or anything I'm watching where I'm like super invested, where I'm super paying attention. Of course, like my heart's going to be more open to whatever kind of emotional things the storytellers are trying to do. But I did tear up, not just like one time, like every time I watch this episode, there's one moment that kind of always gets me. But then when I was taking screenshots, there is something else I noticed, like a little bit more subtle actor performance thing, and that made me tear up as well. So I did really like this episode, but I can see the flaws in it. But whenever something makes me cry, I always got to give it a few extra points for that. I had a mostly good time with this. What about you, Dave?
Father, I want to make completely inappropriate guesses as to what it was that made you emotional, and be like, oh, I bet it was when Rayner was barking out commands at them, or any. Actually, there was a sweet scene in there where he starts taking the opinions of the bridge crew in a way that he kind of really hasn't before, but would be Burnham style. But anyway. Right, so it is indeed the Lock and Maul episode, and it pins down their motivations, which I think was important to get out there, and we confirmed the Breen identity for Locke. I'm curious where I haven't really been watching the fandom closely on this, and I'm curious where they'll land on it, because I did feel like the episode was steeped in a lot of very familiar tropes, for genre stories, but also just kind of in general. You had the sort of a disgraced royalty connecting with a commoner. Mm-hmm. That scene where they trade their punches, but it's kind of prelude, like a little bit of foreplay-ish.
Yeah.
There's a playfulness to it. You get the outlaws who are would die for each other. Even that scene where, somebody is supposed to execute somebody, and instead they turn and they shoot the guards and stuff. Now that said, I did still find myself enjoying it for the reason I've often mentioned. I will go along with things if I'm emotionally invested, and I was, and if it's a sort of a tropes that I like, and we've talked about, I like a lot of these tropes pretty well. I was aware of them, and I was thinking some of this is a little cliched, but there was just a lot of things that kept me on board throughout the episode, whether it was the early, introduction of the ISS Enterprise, mm-hmm. the Breen revelation. Yes, we knew it was kind of coming, but I still enjoyed that. I thought the Lock and Maul holograms were cool. I liked Burnham's "The Federation is all about second chances." What I really liked was when Burnham, clearly kind of, I think, reflecting on her recent interactions with past Book, when she told Locke that she really understood, that his ride or die devotion to Maul. I really liked that moment. My favorite moment, though, was near the end, that reveal about the Mirror Universe refugees who'd made it to the Prime Universe, aided and abetted by Action Saru. I felt like that was some real Star Trek stuff, and I didn't need it to be on screen. It was actually great as a kind of epilogue discussion point. I like this episode quite a bit too. I think, a little more aware of the contrivances in it than in some of the past ones, even though that's not unusual for Discovery in general. But I had a good time with it. I was pretty happy with it, and it did what I think the biggest thing it needed to do, which was to get me very on board Lock and Maul. I actually thought there was a lot of organic conversation too, like when Book was trying to draw out Maul, and sometimes it was sort of working and sometimes it wasn't. But yeah.
And I'll agree with you. A lot of that Maul and Locke stuff that I complimented, I think you're absolutely right when you said a lot of the conceptual stuff was kind of cliched and trite and tropey, but the execution of it is where it won me over, I believe. But I think that's a good observation. It's something we can point out as we go into our episode breakdown.
Yeah, let's dive in.
Sure. Well, let's start off at the beginning. We have the discovery of the wormhole that's going to be our, I guess, kind of the MacGuffin of the episode, right? So we had like the mystery last week of where did Maul and Locke go. We actually, I guess, like the actual like very first scene is Book's log entry. What do you think of that? Like, I really loved getting a log entry from him.
I like that too. Although just right at this moment, I'm trying to remember what the hell is he talking about.
The hunt for Maul and Locke, and his mentor, Cleveland Booker the Fourth, used to say, "You always have choices, no matter how bad it gets." So I think he's hoping that he can convince Maul to make the right choice.
Right, and that's, you can feel that from him throughout the whole episode. So I think it was good. That scene set up the theme of the episode, and the point at which I think both Book and Michael, who have had both been on the other side, the wrong side of the law before, where they're going to empathize with them, and I think that's a pretty potent way to do it. Obviously, what is it, David? How do you say his last name?
Ajala.
Ajala. I feel like he's pretty good at delivering on that kind of stuff. He has a sincerity and a warmth, and he can also feel like he's lost at times and like questing and really, wanting something to happen. And I think he's really good at that.
Yeah, he's become arguably my favorite Discovery character. I like to say my favorite Discovery character is Pike, but at this point, Book has been in more episodes than Pike, so I think maybe I should start saying Cleveland Booker is my favorite Discovery character. But I do love David Ajala's performance, and I hope that we can find some way to keep the character involved in Star Trek, because I think David Ajala is going to end up a lead on a TV show someday, and the franchise might lose him to someone else. So.
It would be great if he could somehow stay on board,
Yeah.
whether that's shoehorning him into
The Academy show?
The Academy show, or something that I haven't thought of yet. But yeah, I'd love to see him stick around too.
When they have that little presentation, I guess, of Stamets and Tilly showing everyone the wormhole, it's a little sappy, but I love that. I like that they got something neat to do to keep them involved in the story. But, it's like Michael is like, okay, Stamets, Tilly, the floor is yours. Everyone pay attention to our two friends over here. It's kind of like, I don't know, that chummy, disco vibe that you either are with it or you're against it seems. But I find it warm and welcoming more often than not, I think.
Yeah, I think there's, even though there is serious stuff in this season, there is a kind of a lightness at times too. It seems several episodes have ended with Burnham saying I'm kind of excited about the treasure hunt part. She's like, let's go, let's get that next clue. And that's that thing where it's like, oh yeah, it's there can be some joy in this. There can be some fun.
Speaking of the treasure hunt thing, that's a very Indiana Jones Tomb Raider type thing of you have to pass through this death trap. It's going to be like either fire is shooting out or there's going to be like spears stabbing out of the wall or something. You have to time it just right though to go through. But here's like the Star Trek version of that. So it's a wormhole that opens and closes quickly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they did a little bit of Geordie LaForge techno babble to get that all lined up. But even when they were doing that, it's there's some lightness between them. They were bantering and kind of falling back into their old rhythms. I have to imagine that Book was kind of like, what brought this on, and not knowing, of course, the specifics about the little time travel weirdness.
Well, they talk about that when
Right, he does later on, but yeah, right at the beginning, because that's later on. She's like, "I'm going to tell you in case we die," but on their way in, she's just kind of like,
in the shuttle ride, well, before we talk about Book and Michael and the shuttle, let's talk about like on the disco. We have that Rayner, very Riker and TNG conversation with Michael about this is a mission too dangerous for a captain and the first officer should be going.
Is that kind of a season 1 Riker thing particularly, or early trip?
I mean,
or did he keep that up?
That's pretty much all of TNG. Riker is the guy who beams to the planets, and Picard stays on the ship. They just stopped fighting over. I guess like Picard stopped arguing with him after season 1.
I was kind of with Rayner on this one, but I will say it fits the wild, kind of unpredictable pattern.
Well, she's a 23rd century girl. She's a 23rd century captain, so she's like, you're like, no, I'm from like those Kirk days. Like I go to every away mission. Just like Pike does on Strange New Worlds. That's how we did it back then. But it kind of makes sense. Like, she's actually going to be familiar with the 23rd century starships. Well, I guess they don't know that at first.
They don't know
though.
that yet.
Yeah, they have no way of knowing that.
But I did think she made a good point about this is to, they know that they're trying to connect with Locke and Maul. You do not want Rayner to be out there trying to connect with people.
No, Michael and Book are the people to try to, as the episode shows, I mean, they do a pretty good job of extending some olive branches, as the episode does a good job of, like, pointing out, choices are important. That was a thing in season 4, actually, like, the reason you make choices matter. But those choices really matter, and before I mention what those choices are, I got to point out Matthew Averett in the live chat with a very generous $10 super chat. Thank you so much, Matthew Averett. He says, have a great weekend, Tex-Trek family. You as well, Matthew. Hope you have a Trek-tastic weekend.
Yeah, what a cool thought. Thank you.
But yeah, they do make these offers to Maul and Locke. Like, you don't have to do this. You can turn yourselves in. You can work with us. We'll do what we can to help you, to keep you safe. And then they reject those choices. They make the wrong choice. They reject those offers. But I think Burnham's kind of validated that, her and Book were the right people to try to present the offer. They seem like they struck a nerve with them.
Yeah, for sure Book was, like, needed there because there was an actual connection, and he's I think she knows how empathic and how convincing he can be when he needs to be, and she works well with him, so it made sense. But I was, like I said, at least initially I was like, Rayner makes a good point. This is a what do you call it, a red
directive.
Red directive. Maybe don't go into the unknown aperture.
We see more of it as, like, he's nervous about being in command of the ship. He's like, wow, I see you have, like, your own system in place here, and I don't quite fit into it yet, and I don't want to be the guy in charge of running the ship, without you around. Like, I need to be able to, like, call Mom for help. He's kind of terrified of her going into this wormhole and not being in communication with her. Not just because he's like, oh, I'm worried about the captain. How do I keep the captain safe if I can't even be in communication with her? But he's also worried about, like, wow, the buck stops with me now. I'm going to have to run the touchy-feely disco ship that I have no idea how if I can do this. So,
well, you know what? I something did make me kind of laugh thinking about that. It's not like they were asking him to go into the middle of some super tense situation. They're basically just saying, hey, could you wait here and pick us up when we're done? and I was like, you should be able to handle that. But yes, of course, the unexpected always happens around these kind of things. They know they're in the middle of a serious treasure hunt.
And they also, I think I said last week also, Dave, I got this on the record last week. I said, you know what? I want some Kelleran world building. We see Rayner knows so much about, like, Earth culture, and I think it's because, like, the writers wanted to give him a lot of, like, old-fashioned dialogue, which I enjoy, so not a knock on them, I like that, but it's like, it'd be cool if they also, give us some Kelleran culture, and we start getting that here in this scene when Michael starts quoting the Ballad of Kroll, which sounds awesome, and when she uses the Kelleran saying, serve it without a grum of ossicod, which I guess means, like, give it to me straight without any bullshit, or something like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and keep that one handy, too. I don't want everything to be all shale, like in that episode of TNG.
That was Enterprise.
Enterprise, yeah.
Terra Nova, season 1, I think episode 8, 9, somewhere around there. Someone fact check me. That's pretty close.
That's pretty impressive.
I'm gonna say 9. No, wait, 6. Episode 6. We just watched that like a few months ago, so it's fresh on my mind. Mm-hmm. But we get in the wormhole. We kind of have, like, Michael's. It's kind of awkward, but it's also, like, kind of nice to be alone with Book. It seems. I'm sad that Book doesn't have his ship, that he has to fly around on a Starfleet shuttle instead of his cool ship from last season. But speaking of cool ships, Maul and Locke's cool ship is destroyed, so I guess we're not going to see any more of it. That made me sad.
Yeah, I wonder if they're gonna have to kind of carjack something. Like, I wouldn't mind a little GTA sequence with those characters a little later on.
That kind of would have been cool if they stole the ISS Enterprise and ran off with.
Oh man,
but
that would have been dope. Okay, yeah, we'll get to that when we get to it. I have more thoughts, but we'll talk about it in a little bit.
It is a fun reveal though when Michael sees it out the window of their shuttle. We get like the reveal of the 1701, and then it says ISS Enterprise, and it starts playing the Mirror Universe music that Jeff Russo composed way back in season 1, and just kind of like that, like, enticing hook of how did it end up in interdimensional space? And I don't know, but it's got to be a hell of a story. And then cut to the opening credits and the theme song. That's kind of a fun way to start things off.
Mm-hmm. By the way, it also occurs to me, you talked about this being like an Indiana Jones trap, and it's a classic trope, kind of done cool in this way, to show somebody who didn't make it.
Yeah, there's a wrecked ship. You have to go into like a shipwrecked ship to get, a treasure chest or a map or a scroll or something. That's very common.
But specifically, I meant Locke and Maul's ships got like, basically the spears got them.
Oh yeah, to show the consequences of what the heroes are about to face. Yeah, that's a good point too. Yeah, let's talk about when they arrive on the Enterprise and find Maul and Locke in sickbay. Book has that Endorian hack to get the ship working, and we kind of see like him and Burnham. They kind of go back to like their old banter. They
courier style.
Yeah, when he's like, "Oh, you're not gonna call me a hero among men or whatever." So like, and I like that they bring up her using her Terran counterparts like passwords and stuff. Like, remember in season 1, she had to impersonate the Mirror Universe Michael. Mm-hmm. That was years ago, so she still remembers from like 4 years earlier. She still or maybe like 5 years from her perspective, because she got in the 32nd century a year earlier than the rest of the Discovery, and there's like a whole year of adventures with Book that we don't see. But she still remembered like her like login credentials of her Mirror Universe counterpart. I thought that was kind of funny.
That makes sense to me, actually, because I think she's got some Vulcan discipline underneath her kind of very human elements. And I bet there's a whole lot of stuff like that. It sort of makes sense for the characters. Some of the times the risk-taking is that there's probably some little, those old inner Vulcan dialogues and logics, planning it out and being like, can I pull this off? What are the odds? All this throughout. And I bet she's got a damn good password memory.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I'm appropriate to say this, but I'd be curious to hear from anyone in the community. But I feel like Michael Burnham maybe like really embodies a lot of like black excellence, because she's always like so good at like the Vulcan stuff, and she's got to like always be on top with I don't know, it just feels like everything she's kind of starts off like disadvantaged, like having like her parents killed, and she has to go be like a foster kid on Vulcan. And then she had to, deal with like all the Klingon stuff, and then she had to like go to the 32nd century, learn how to be a courier, and then learn how to function within Starfleet in the 32nd century. It's like she's often put in these situations where it feels like she's like incredibly disadvantaged, but then has to excel.
Yeah. Discovery, with its kind of existential threat levels, has particularly puts its characters through the ringer.
And it's kind of ironic, if you're familiar with Star Trek and you see them talking about like Mirror Universe Spock, and Burnham saying, that he's probably as terrible as everyone else in the Mirror Universe. But as she'll later learn, like, oh no, there's actually like some pretty cool things about that dude.
Yeah, I like that little sort of moment of kind of a little bit of fatalism, a little bit of grim fatalism. Like, as much as I love him, yeah, he was probably awful too. I do like how they kind of turn that around, mirror that at the end with some rather upbeat things, at least about the immediate refugees of the Mirror Universe.
It's an interesting, story to add that there was that during those times of reform that we know about from Deep Space Nine, Mirror Universe, Kira, the intendant, she says that, Spock reformed the Empire and it weakened them. And then, everyone else who hated the Terran Empire, we just went and took over the place. So, we've talked about this before, Dave, how that's always kind of bothered us, that like the reformer, the guy who like actually like did like a lot of like good things, in Star Trek, that character should be proven right. That shouldn't be like, oh, that was the wrong thing to do. That should be the right thing in any universe. So it's kind of cool that they.
Yeah, they allowed for some success within the,
Yeah.
I guess, potentially larger failure.
They gave
also,
Mirror Universe Spock a win. Like they gave him like
gave
a
him
big win. Like it was
And
worth
they
it.
also
That
they
Kirk speech was worth it.
Did some neat stuff with that, by the way, in some of the Mirror Universe comics, the Next Gen Mirror Universe comics, where they basically suggested that history was kind of rewritten by various people to cover up how good some of the reforms were going. So I thought that was a neat idea too. These are all good notions. This one is the big canon one, so good job, yay y'all.
Yeah, big shout out to the Mirror Universe comics and J.K. Woodward, the comic book artist on a lot of that stuff, talked about that when we interviewed him back in 2018, 6 years ago. So,
oh my God. When we were fresh recruits on board the Starship Texas.
I have a big theory about this Mirror Universe refugee ship, though, coming across through the interdimensional pocket space.
Do you?
This could tie into that Section 31 made for streaming movie they're doing later this year, right?
How so?
I mean, it could take place in that time period, kind of like that Lost era. But I think this might be something that takes place before that, setting the stage. But, imagine this mission, though. Like, there's like a bunch of refugees coming across from the top secret Mirror Universe that we don't talk about with anyone. Because as we established in Discovery Season 1, that has to be classified so that everyone who lost their loved ones in the Klingon War don't try to go to the Mirror Universe to reconnect with their loved ones. They're trying to keep that under wraps. But here comes some refugees. So do we accept these people in? Maybe we use a secret Section 31 team led by a Terran with Giorgio to bring these people in secretly and find new lives for them in the Prime Universe. That could be something that that's kind of in the time period that's going to be set with a young Rachel Garrett. Maybe it's possible that'd be sometime after all we know this is sometime after Mirror.
Yeah.
And before TNG, because we know that the Admiral Chow is part of that cabal who found the progenitor tech shortly after the chase during the Dominion War.
Fatheree, I can also see that there could, imagining that this is the scenario that there might be some movement within Section 31 to not bring them in, to take them out. We don't want the contamination of this. We don't want them being chased by other Mirror Universe people.
Yeah.
A faction that's wants to do a CIA kill team on them. And they think that somebody like Giorgio might be on board, but maybe she's not so on board. But it's an interesting notion. I could see it.
Yeah, I think if that's not the story in the Section 31 made for streaming movie, I think it could be the story in a sequel or prequel to or its own thing. But I don't know. I would love to see bring back Doug Jones as Action Saru. Maybe he captains. Maybe Mirror Universe Action Saru maybe captions this Enterprise. And how easy would it have been to shoot all that? You just do what the Discovery people did. You just go across the street to the Strange New World sets and shoot over there.
Yep. Although we know Doug Jones doesn't want to put that makeup on anymore, but
Yeah, but they shot that movie in 4 weeks, so it's
right.
It's a lot easier than spending 8 months or shooting a whole season or something like that.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. I love Saru. By the way, the locket that Burnham is holding in the
that was convoluted.
A little bit, but it's one of those things. In retrospect, it makes sort of more sense to me.
Yeah, it makes total sense, but it's just I had to watch it twice to make sure I understood that.
I do like in the comments, DT says, "I love that Burnham pocketed this locket perfect decoy."
Yeah,
and yeah, it is one of those things in retrospect when you know the deal. And what is she? She's actually getting some Prime Universe DNA on there, so that
she takes off part of her badge, a little piece of metal or something off of her comm badge on her Tron armor that they wear in Discovery in the 32nd century.
Right.
And she puts it in the locket to give it a Prime Universe quantum signature. Because even like the 23rd century scanners on this Enterprise, they can determine by looking at the quantum signature if you're from the Prime universe or from the Mirror universe. If you're a person or an object, either one. That's how they were able to determine that Maul and Locke and the Clue were all in sickbay, because they found the 3 quantum signatures there. So this way, this locket will have a Prime universe quantum signature inside of it.
It's a neat idea. Maybe it should have been a little bit more...
yeah. Or if Michael had just like said
presented.
that... If she just like said to Book what she was doing,
no, you got to
maybe...
say it after though. It's got to be kind of a.
Okay.
It's got to be revealed. Only
there you
in the
go.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
I guess we
that
kind of
cool.
get that when Locke is like, "Oh, you made a decoy. Didn't think you had it in you, Starfleet."
Right. But yeah, I think the idea was cool. Maybe concept slightly muddy, execution slightly muddy. And then they then they go and they hit the med bay, sick bay. And they have a little pew pew with some illusions.
Yeah, I liked the conversations in the sick bay a lot. I think that was like Maul and Locke like really like opened up during their conversations with Burnham and Book.
You know, I'm a big fan of Sergio Leone westerns, and there's a lot of big melodrama in that, and people kind of saying really dramatic things at gunpoint and extended standoff sequences and stuff. And it didn't occur to me until just now that this is not like shot that way. He has these very long shots. It's not his style, but there is something to that or even John Woo, where action is combined with high melodrama, and you have these sequences where you kind of know that people aren't going to like start shooting immediately, that they have reached a sort of detente, and they can talk about sort of emotional stuff, where, you know, they get them to reveal some things. I really liked all of that stuff.
And I was worried at first because I thought the banter at first was kind of like lame action movie banter. Like you could have just said hello and like stuff like. But then like when they started, opening up a bit, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty fascinating stuff. So I liked having
did play better on a second viewing for me.
I liked having the 4 of them spend so much time in that room. And this was a cheap episode to shoot. You know, they used only like the Discovery sets and then the Strange New World sets, just with like a little bit of Mirror Universe stuff decorated on there. I almost feel like they could have done a lot more Mirror Universe. Like they should have made like the ship dangerous to be on and had like agony booths and sickbay or something. But it was part of that reformed mission. So I guess like the Spock's more reformed Terrans and Action Saru of the Mirror Universe, I guess like they probably like took down all the agony booths, you know, so
yeah.
It does make sense, but it would have maybe been a bit more of a flavorful episode to show a bit of that danger and evilness of the Mirror Universe creeping through.
Yeah, it's true, but I think it actually makes more sense that they took that stuff down. It was a little weird that in some ways it almost could have been any ship other than thematically it sets up, you know, the ending and some reveals about second chances. But
the ship gets a second chance. This like terrible ship that like Pike and Kirk did terrible things on, you know, the evil Mirror Universe bastards, Captain Pike and Captain Kirk. But now that ship became like a refugee ship. It's like a ship of good things.
Yeah,
I love that.
Which I do like, and I am quite sure that its story is not done yet. I think is it Detmer and Awoshikan?
Yeah. Well, it also gives an excuse of like why those actors are not in this season as much. I think it's more that Paramount didn't want to pay them as much. That like season 5, you actors are starting to ask for too much money, so we're gonna get some cheaper actors on some episodes too. So let's bring out Gallo and Asha, our new bridge crew people. But yeah, like in universe, I think that'd be I don't know. I kind of want to see like that story of them on that Enterprise. It sucks that they got that job instead of Reese after like Reese's Constitution class.
Ship.
His fanboyness of the 23rd century Constitution class literally like saved the ship from the time bug thing.
It's weird that they didn't draw a little more attention to him seeing that and going like he should have been like hot damn when he saw that. Aaron in the comments says exactly what I was thinking a second ago. Imagine if we had 22 episodes, we'd actually get to see that story.
Yeah, but we'd see a lot of lame episodes too. I think if we went back to,
like what, lame the way DS9 was lame. But look, I know it's a different era of TV, and it is what it is. But yeah, it's kind of fun to imagine, and I think that. Father, do you think the Enterprise is going to have any more role in this season, or do you think it'll only be in, like, I don't know, if it turns up in Section 31 or something?
Yeah, I think it'll show up again in Discovery.
Because I feel like it's like a Chekhov's gun. It's Chekhov's mirror spaceship. That, in some way, shape, or form, Woshikan and Detmer are going to come to the rescue, riding in like the cavalry when they're like something.
It's hard to imagine. Like, what's a 23rd century ship going to be good for in the 32nd century? But what if it gets like a cool like a retrofit like the Disco did, and it comes back with like detached nacelles and cool 32nd century tech built into it?
Yeah. Or in the classic Trek tradition, oh, you're the only one in the sector, kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know quite. It's, there may be some final leg of the hunt that they are closer to, and the spore drives down, and they're like, shit, well, could y'all go do this really difficult thing? And we'll get a cool little spotlight episode that'd be as if, or at least a portion of the episode that'd be like if Chekhov and Sulu got an episode of kicking ass. But yeah, we'll see. I would like to see it again. I feel like it's weird to have spent so much time with such a specific ship without having some.
I mean, the main reason was to make the episode cheaper and use the Strange New World sets. That's the main reason. But it'd be cool, if it did have like a second purpose to like set something up to happen later in the season that would have like some payoff.
Yeah, I guess I won't be disappointed if it doesn't. And again, like I said during my first opening thoughts, one of my favorite scenes was just the reveal about what its history was. I thought that was really cool. So that justified a lot for me right there.
And this is when we get our first bit of Breen backstory for Locke, when Maul says the word Araga, which is a big thing, the Breen blood bounty. Kind of convenient when you just bring up this thing out of the blue and all of a sudden it's like, a super big deal. But like I said, the execution of this stuff won me over. But this, like Michael's like, oh my God, you're a Breen? Like, that was like we finally know what an unmasked Breen looks like, but there's a little bit more to it with Locke.
Yeah, and I confess, I'm slightly confused as to the difference between a kind of translucent Breen and a slightly, and a non-translucent Breen like Locke is, and like why they're. I mean, I do get there's cultural traditions and there's colorism and things like that. It felt like it was one of those things.
It's not as color. It's the fact that he solidifies and becomes like that solid skin version.
Yeah, I guess. Why don't they solidify? Do we assume that the helmet keeps them gooey? Seals the moisture in.
That's exactly what happens. The writer Carlos Cisco talked to a Trek movie about this, and he basically said like, the Breen are these like soft, gooey creatures, and that's why they stay in these suits, these refrigeration suits that can like cool them down to like freeze them and harden them. And in their older days, though, they used to take a solid form themselves, but it takes like a lot of effort, and that's kind of why Locke is always kind of like, he seems like he's kind of like tired, or like he's like kind of like straining a lot of times. It kind of seems like, and Maul's kind of concerned about him. She's like, are you okay? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. We get like a lot of stuff like that. That must be why like some people were like wondering if he was sick or not. But the Breen of the 32nd century view that as you're showing other species your weakness if you have to like harden yourself in front of them and you show them that. Like, we're so powerful that we can just like walk around in our green gooey forms and our cool suits and not have to worry about like hardening ourselves. We're that strong. And if you take off your suit and harden your skin, you make us look weak.
Right.
I hope that's revealed within the show, because that all sounds like pretty cool lore to add in.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got that there's a cultural taboo against it. I was just a little hazy on exactly, why the taboo and, how it generated. But I definitely got, oh yeah, his uncle's a prick. These guys are creepy fascists and mercs. So yeah.
Let's get
But
into
they do
the
have
the
a
Breen the Breen flashback stuff.
yeah.
We see a younger Maul. I assume only a couple years younger, but making deliveries to the. We'll get another use of the term bucketheads, like Jet Reno was saying last week. So we're going to steal that from the other Star franchise. That's very Breen to do. To be fair, Breen are all about stealing from Star Wars. They took Princess Leia's design from Return of the Jedi. Her Jabba's palace disguise. I mean, it looks so similar. The helmet.
And they have the Mandalorian ethos of not unhelmeting. But it's nice to see them start to get some. They're gaining a culture, even if it seems like it's one that's in many ways is limiting and destructive.
I agree with you about their first flight. I agree with you about their first fight at the beginning. It almost seems playful, like foreplay or something, kind of foreshadowing their romance and kind of their more playful relationship. When I was looking at the screenshots of this, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of sexy imagery they tried to create between Maul and this guy in a weird stormtrooper suit.
Yeah.
So it works pretty well, and I think
Fatheree,
the Breen.
I was gonna say there's some sort of straight up kind of BDSM imagery, cuffing, pinned to the wall, grappled, and I think that's cool. I think it shows that they have a kind of there is a sort of sexual element to their connection, and that they're they're not vanilla. I guess I'd say that's the vibe of it anyway. We don't know that for sure, but their fighting seems to suggest it.
They have some euphemisms they use between the two of them. Do you want to inspect my shuttle for tribbles and stuff like that? But, is that a code word or something? But I think
it all did sort of take place in that hangar bay, and it felt just a little limited in there. But that's the kind of place. That's where they can meet. And
it's kind of their desperation. Well, and that's. I mean, I don't know if we need to spend too much time talking about this, but that's also a kink for some people is to fool around in public. But the hangar bay itself was a really beautiful location, and it made me thankful for the AR wall. I just wish they could create these really cool locations that aren't a giant cavernous space. I watched our friend Jessie Gender's review of this episode on her YouTube channel, and she mentioned how the AR wall, they only create these giant cavernous spaces, so we get a lot of those, but I was thinking it'd be fun if we could have seen Maul and Locke hanging out in Maul's shuttle or something. But the point of this episode was to do things cheap and not have to build new sets. So they used the AR wall for the Breen stuff. To be fair, though, they created a very beautiful location, and it made me really respect the 32nd century Breen and view them. That's one of the things I said. Without the Emerald Chain, I want to know who are the big superpowers that can rival the Federation in this 32nd century galaxy. And now the Breen Imperium seem like they are someone to fear and respect.
I like the world building that went on not too long from now in the flashbacks, where she's saying after they've connected romantically, and she's saying that she's got to go. She needs to get some big platinum payouts in Emerald Chain territory. And he's like, "Oh, Osira's a butcher. What are you doing?" And she says, "Y'all's faction wars here with the Imperium are almost as bad." And so that was a nice bit of world building. We've heard about it. We've heard about there's succession issues, but we kind of get a little bit more confirmation of it. And so they're a powerhouse, but sounds like they are continually Game of Thronesing themselves.
Yeah, and we get a lot of that with oh, you're the Primarch's nephew, but you've been demoted, and it shows that maybe Locke he's not on board, whatever bad Breen things his uncle is trying to do if he got himself demoted. And also shows oh, he's kind of a good guy at heart if he's critical of Osira,
right?
That instead of being oh yeah, I guess they're just paying you more, but he's no, Osira's terrible, she's as bad as my uncle. Why would you work for her?
And I think maybe not just critical of that, but worried about her. So he's not just I just do whatever the job is or anything, or a mercenary person like it seems like a lot of the Breen are. he has fallen for her at this point. He cares about somebody, and he doesn't want her putting herself at the risk you'd be with under Osira.
Yeah, and so the what they say on the show is that the Breen have two faces, and they're both, I guess, he only wants to show her like his hardened, fleshy face. He doesn't want to show her, I guess, like what the Breen consider their real face. So it's I'm not sure why he's so into like turning into like his solid form and why he likes that so much. Other than maybe he just likes like the physical connection he can have with
that makes
this woman.
sense. But also, Fatheree, it makes sense that he would want to do. It seems like he doesn't fit in with his culture in particular, and is already resisting in multiple ways. Mm-hmm. So, once you've broken sort of one taboo, more come easily, and I think him taking on that solid form is also an act of rebellion against his people.
I think it also, again, I don't want to speak for this community, but I think it might also have like a lot of parallels with the queer community and how a lot of people, they might not deal with these things until they start falling in love with someone. And then it makes them kind of like reevaluate who they are, their relationship with their family and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes love gives you wings. So, you find that inner strength to do what you want to do or be who you want to be when you're around someone who cares about you.
So when they do get caught, when the Breen uncle finds them, we find out that they have the genetic code of leadership, I guess. They call themselves the Yod Thought, or that's what the Primarch of the Sixth Fleet says. But so it's, I don't know, I guess like
that
Breen
sounds eugenics-y.
Yeah, the Breen are like really into like the
or just
bloodlines
monarchy.
and yeah. So, but the Primarch himself, like I thought he looked pretty cool. I like it took me a while to get used to it, but I really do like the 32nd century Breen. I like that they flattened the snout on the helmet, made it look less like Leia's disguise, but you can still see a lot of the elements. It's just like, okay, here's like a version of that's 800 years more advanced. But you would still, if I saw this, I would still be like, oh, that kind of looks like a Breen from Deep Space Nine.
The visor is the key.
Yeah. The visor's the key. Yeah, having like as Maul calls Locke, green eye, from the helmet. That is what makes it recognizable. I think you're absolutely right. And I thought like his little like programmable matter like Breen disruptor, how he just like held out his hand and then like almost looked like he's kind of like a sorcerer, like he has like dark magic, standing there in like his armor and his cape, and then like this deadly weapon just kind of manifests in his hand. I don't know, like he commanded like a lot of power, and that's he's kind of a lame character. We don't like know too much about him, or like we can't like see his face or anything to connect with him, but just like his presentation is like really cool.
Sorry, were you talking about the Primarch there?
Yeah. It's more of like, it's what we're talking about, like the concepts are a little trite, but the execution has some really fun stuff to it.
Yeah, I can absolutely get behind a sort of faceless bad guy who is just like really pretty much the worst, and needs to get his ass kicked. And so that's good stuff. And I feel like we'll want to call this out a few more times as we continue along. But I thought both actors did some great work in this episode. The actress playing Maul really got to she got to emote.
Yeah, Eve really Harlow.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't know. I forget the names. The actor playing Locke. He's
Elias Tofexis. I think
Elias
is how you
Tofexis,
say it.
Okay. He was doing like that subtler. He presents himself as a stoic, and that fits very much the Breen tradition. And even though he's breaking out of them, he's still that guy. But that makes it mean more when he smiles or when he puts it or when he shows himself to be vulnerable. So I really thought those moments were great.
And a fun little actor thing he did is he actually like changed the way that Locke talks. He started speaking like more regal when he was like talking back to his uncle. When he's when he's like speak in her language. At least she deserves to understand. Or like something like he speaks like he's a prince or something instead of like my uncle's an asshole. Kind of like more of a normal dude.
Right.
That was a funny line about like the shiny boots when Ma was like, "Is that a euphemism or something?" He's like, "No, he just like really likes our boots to be shiny." That almost felt like Lower Decks, but I'm like, oh my god, I'm watching a Breen fall in love, and I love that I love it. It was fun.
Yeah, DT just said in the audience.
Code switching.
Code switching. Yeah.
I do that when I talk to someone with like a big like redneck Texan accent. Like I get like I start talking a lot more country. So
yeah, I'm a native Texan, but it doesn't always come out. But if I am around someone who's got a bit more of an accent, it will start to sneak out for sure.
But yeah, I mean, like it was predictable. Like as soon as like the two soldiers grabbed her, I was like, okay, well, Locke is gonna shoot them and then run off with her. But it was a cool little emotional beat when his uncle just says like the word "Eriga." And Locke says, "I know." It's like he is like this is like the gravest consequences in Breen society. And Locke says like, "Yeah, I know." And like I love her enough that like this isn't even like a hard fucking choice for me. I'm gonna shoot you in the shoulder right now.
Yep. You can tell that probably Locke has been thinking about this. He's been like maybe turning over scenarios. What if it came to it? And so that when it happens, I also think there's a little bit of that Breen stoicism to it too. But also, I get the impression that he's thought about this and he was ready at that point. In the moment he became ready.
But what made me cry, like I almost want to cry now just trying to describe it to y'all. But like that moment when he says, "They'll never stop hunting me," and then when Maul says, "No, they'll never stop hunting us." Like I've watched this episode 4 times and I cried every time when I get to that part. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm a sucker for these two. I'm surprised, Dave, you were really taken with them from the first episode, and I wasn't like really like won over by them. I think until like I don't know, maybe until episode they hadn't like done much in like episode 3. We saw them like do like the deal with the Goblin Man, and then or was it, no, that was like last week. That was episode 4. Yeah, episode 3 they just like planted the spider on Adira. I don't know at what point I started rooting for them. I guess I was just doing the show, just having these deep dive discussions with you and our audience. But I at some point I discovered I was really taken with them. But like now here after episode 5, like I totally am invested in their storyline and want to see what I like. That's one of the biggest concerns of mine, with like these remaining 5 episodes. I'm pretty sure Michael's going to be okay. I'm pretty sure I know what's going to happen to Tilly. She's going to go teach at the academy. I think we're getting a Saru and Tarina wedding, but I have no idea what's going to happen with Maul and Locke, and that's very exciting.
Yeah. It's as exciting and a bit nerve-wracking. What's interesting is that they are also, their connection is informing Burnham and Book, especially Burnham, because she hearing, I think, Locke talk about Maul really affected her, and she can't just say that to him, but she does. The way she's talking to him, the way her voice softens and everything, and the way she says she identifies with him, I thought that's some really good discovery writing. I can call them out for some of their plot stuff, but I think a lot of times individually they kind of redeem themselves. Yeah,
like the mirrors theme that Discovery like used a lot in season 1, and then again in its final season. Like that's a obvious, neat idea. That kind of like another example of like why this is kind of a good season to go out on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't seen anything yet that felt like it was like this would be a misstep to go out on. There's multiple elements that feel like they could work pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sad that we're not going to have like a whole season of more Rayner on the ship, but I'm still fingers crossed that he somehow works his way into the Academy show. I'm still hoping for that.
If he doesn't die.
Do you have any?
He will. I don't think he will. I think.
I mean, we know that was not the original plan, because Callum Keith Rennie keeps saying like, if they had done a season 6, I would have been in season 6. So I think the initial plan was Doug Jones was done after season 5, and he was like, I'm not doing a season 6 with y'all. And they're like, okay, we need to introduce another older white guy alien first officer to fit into the Saru-sized hole that Doug Jones is going to leave. And they came up with Rayner.
I believe that simply on the basis of they don't want to be repetitive about how Shaw's story played out. I think they will avoid it.
I hope so.
you never know quite how things are going to end for
Yeah.
people. Things could still end sadly in a lot of ways.
Jill 47 operating tonight under the alias Green Eye is pointing out in the live audience that perhaps the reshoots kill him off, and that is my fear. Because of the reshoots, I guess we don't know, but I think other possibilities for Rayner is that he stays on as first officer, or I don't know, maybe the show ends with Book and Burnham riding off into the sunset, and Rayner gets command of the Discovery again. I don't think that one is likely, but it is likely to happen. But it is a possibility, I suppose.
Interesting. Maybe the old dog is put out to pasture, though.
You know who else would make a good first officer though? If it's not going to be Burnham and Rayner, if it's going to be like some other combination, I think Culber would be a good first officer. But
we don't see that. I don't. Have we ever seen a medic who's a first officer?
Well, Dr. Crusher commanded her own ship in All Good Things, so I see no reason why a doctor couldn't be put on the command track.
No, I don't see why not either. Certainly, McCoy played a big enough role that I could almost imagine him in that scenario. But it's just we haven't seen it. But yeah, I think so too.
Do you have anything else to say on the Breen flashbacks before we switch back to the ISS Enterprise?
I don't think so. I think we hit most of the stuff.
Cool. Well, back in the sickbay on the Enterprise, the force fields come up in an interesting way where Locke and Burnham are trapped within the sickbay, but Book and Maul are on the outsides. So it's going to be up to them working together to free Burnham and Locke.
Yes, this was like kind of a more complex version of when Darth Maul was fighting the Jedi in Phantom Menace.
Oh, yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
There it was just about, like, who's going to get the first shot off or, the first attack once those shields go down. This is where, in the pause in between, people don't glower at each other, they talk to each other.
But it was good.
That's an interesting difference between, like, Star Trek and Star Wars, actually, right there.
Very much. Yeah, that's a good point. And it's also, it was interesting pairings. Book clearly wanted some time alone with Maul to talk to her, but it also gave an opportunity for Burnham and Locke to do some to open up to one another. And that was cool. I liked that stuff. I liked both of them a lot. I also let's talk about the Book and Maul exchange first. Mm-hmm.
The stuff about her dad and his mentor was interesting. They had very different opinions about his Cleveland Booker.
You think they handled that well? Of like Book being like, I have a lot of respect for this guy, but I understand like why you might not. But if he actually says I get he was a shit dad to you, but he was a good mentor to me. I think they handled that well. But what do you think?
I thought so too in general. Although I am actually unclear on like what happened, and I assume that we maybe are going to find out a little bit more. But I'm like, yes, this does happen in real life. A person is sometimes one thing to one person and one thing to another. But like, do we have any sense of why he ran out on Maul and his wife?
To get money to get them off world to that colony in the Gamma but
then he like just never did, or did he die before he could?
Yeah, they didn't go into like a lot of detail. It kind of sounded like Book was like he couldn't get back or he didn't know how bad things were.
Yeah, that may be the case. I what I really liked is that moment when Book said, he just straight said, I hated my dad too, and kind of revealed that vulnerability about him. And he's also not a guy who says things like hate too easily. He's pretty easygoing. So that's kind of a big thing for him to say. I felt like, and to make that connection with her, say like, hey, I'm not just rah-rah for every dad or every parental figure. I'm not blood is thicker than water. I understand that. And I think that's good, because I think that's bullshit, that you need to love someone just because of they're genetically connected to you.
Right.
So yeah, I thought that was really good. And is it Eve?
Eve Harlow?
Eve Harlow. What a old classic Hollywood sounding name. She she put on some really great performance in these moments.
Yeah, there's a moment when she sheds a tear that when I noticed it when I was taking the screenshots yesterday, getting ready to do the live show, it made me tear up when I was looking at it because she's trying to sound like all tough and she's putting on like a pretty good, game face to Book when Book says, I get that things were bad for you and your mom on Caller 5, but I don't think that Cleveland knew anything about any of that. And she says, maybe he did, maybe he didn't. Doesn't make a shit to me, or whatever she says. And she tries to sound like really tough, like that's true, like she doesn't care. Maybe he didn't know. But there's she lets out a tear when she's saying that. So it's actually like really hitting a nerve.
Right. Yeah, and that's good scripting, good acting. Some of the stronger scenes of the episode. I saw earlier Jill mentioning that she said she was like a half an hour into the episode before it kind of won her over, or she felt connected to it. And I had a little bit of that on my first viewing too, where I was like, "This is interesting, but I'm not feeling like connected." I think it strengthens in the latter half as we get these reveals, as we get these kind of emotional moments.
So the Burnham and Locke convo in sickbay, when Locke is talking about wanting to possibly consider turning himself in if he can serve his time with Maul, and that the main thing for him is just her safety, and it seems like the main thing for her is his safety. This whole season, she's been the more ambitious one, the more pushy one. I've been pointing that out, Dave, if you recall. But, in the first episode, she's the one who tells Locke, do you want to settle for pebbles or do you want the entire mountain? And, like recently, I guess in episode 4, when Locke says, we could just, go hide somewhere. And then Maul says, no, like if we pull this off, we'll be free forever. And it seems like they're true motivations are just keeping the other one safe, and Maul is determined to get Locke free of this Araga, this blood bounty on him, and Locke is determined to not let Maul be harmed because of the blood bounty that's on him. So it's almost kind of like a Romeo and Juliet situation where like these people are so invested in like the other one's outcome that I don't know, like I'm worried about like both of them, like we might have like a real tragedy.
Yeah. She also, though, we do find out that she has a goal in mind. She has, and it's real pie in the sky. I think Joel in the on our Discord server said that the place she's trying to get to in the Gamma Quadrant is the Big Rock Candy Mountain. Do you know the reference, Fatheree?
Yeah, totally.
Song? Yeah, and
but it was also Tarka's thing in season 4. Tarka also had this destination that was going to be a utopia, supposedly.
Maybe that means one of the writers is just really drawn to that kind of romantic idea. But yeah, she wants to get there, and I wonder. I have this feeling he doesn't believe in it, but he wouldn't want to break her heart and say that, and he's gonna like support her until they get there and find it doesn't exist or whatever happens. That scene where he's considering turning themselves in, because he does seem like a little physically weary too. Mm-hmm. Even in this scene, Locke and Maul and Book are kind of active. They're moving around. They're pushing buttons. These two people are just sitting there, tired, standoff in sickbay. They're just. Well,
they do have a pretty physical confrontation, right. But we see like Locke doesn't come out on top on that, and
right. Also, that only happens when shit explodes around him.
Yeah, that's fair. When.
Oh, go ahead, Fatheree. Go ahead.
When Locke says that about Maul, when he asks if he can turn himself in and serve their time together, and that she's like the most important thing to him, Burnham says, I get that, I do. So I think we can assume like her romantic feelings for Book. Maybe I shouldn't say assume, but I at least hope. Like I think they're like. This is confirmation like they're still there and the two of them are going to get back together. And there's more between the two of them later in this episode, but I think, okay, we're going to spend like the first half of the season with them like on the outs, and then the second half is going to be them getting closer and closer and being eventually a couple again.
Not to make it sound trite, but I think that's the game plan. I think it's interesting. I think they teased early on that we might see some more sorrowful stories, or at least kind of melancholy, like Adira and Gray drifting apart. But I think they presented that as not just pure sad, a little sad, as something you mourn, but they are moving in positive directions in other ways, and so it seemed reasonable. And it seemed a little more sad in the case of Burnham and Book, because something kind of artificial, the 10C came between them and this terrible tragedy of for his planet, and so that drew them apart. It clouded his judgment, and so they in better circumstances they would still be together, and so I think this show is going to give them that ability to happen.
So Maul gets impatient and does the power surge, even though Book says that's probably a terrible idea on a ship this old, and I guess puts the ship on a collision course. But Book, what do you think about like Book's choice of like, I'm just going to leave my gun right here where the bad guy can get it, and just give her the choice and see what she does?
You know what? It seems you could argue it's risky, but this is a guy who knows how to read people. I think on a strategic level, it was sound. And I might even say that he really wasn't taking that big a chance. I think he knew that they had connected. And so he was like, if I give up power voluntarily, she will not hurt me. We have made a connection. And then so it made sense to me.
I mean,
how about you, Fatheree?
Both of these people would be better off if they did kill Book and Burnham, but they clearly like don't want to. Like they're only going to do that to someone if they have to, or if they like really hate that person.
The earliest example that we had that they were not bad people was that they don't kill. And so,
well, they're not terrible people. I mean, you could still say that they're bad, but
that's true. And I guess they don't kill for like pleasure. I think if you get between them and escape, they might kill.
I mean, if we look at like the past villains of Discovery from Cole, Mirror, Lorca, Control, Osira, they're definitely like, okay, these are the only people like I would want to like hang out with are going to be Maul and Locke, and even them like it would still be kind of questionable, but. They're definitely a better better stripe of villain than we've had on the show before.
Did they killed who was the Data fence?
Fred the android.
They
Locke.
Fred or probably
in self-defense though. He was shooting at Maul.
Right. I feel like they've taken some pretty big risks. Causing the avalanche was a pretty big thing, but overall, yeah, they're the show has told us, and we have seen that they don't go out of their way to hurt people.
Even with Michael, like Locke tells her, get out of my way or I will cut you down. But he does tell her, he warns her at first. He probably didn't know that she's a badass at Vulcan martial arts and studied the Sus Mana and does some kind of move on them and stabs them. And apparently Breen have blood when they're in their solid form. There's a thing in DS9, they said one time that like the Breen don't have blood, but maybe they do when they solidify.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable to assume that they... I don't know if they're quite like changelings where they're like all liquidy, or whether it's like there's internal organs, but the exterior is a little bit jello-y, But yeah, whatever the case, he definitely did there.
I think that, the episode ends with kind of the mystery of, like, what will happen to Locke? Is he fatally wounded? Is he going to bleed to death? Will Maul be able to save him? Find out next week. I think he's going to be okay. I don't think they're going to kill him off just yet. But I do think we'll learn more about the Breen and maybe a bit about, like, their biology, and those types of questions will be more of a focus next. Because, yeah, we're going to have to see, like, well, why doesn't he die? What's going to repair him or hold him together? So they're going to need some substance there about like the science or the biology, I think.
Fatheree, at this point they've given enough screen time to them that I think they could pretty readily, if they wanted to, in future episodes, cut to Locke and Maul's version of the chase, and we could see them for like
I would love
somewhat extended scenes. So yeah, let's see them on the shuttle. They're talking, they're comparing notes, she's trying to patch him up. We can get a little exposition.
They're not on a shuttle. They're on a Terran warp pod that I don't think we're ever going to get like an explanation and see the inside of. But wherever they go, whatever safe haven they're trying to get to or whatever, like
That's basically a
I think
shuttle.
I think it'd be cool to open with that next week.
Yeah, yeah. I suspect we'll see a little bit more frequently that we'll see their side of what's going on.
Well, let's talk about the stuff going on the Discovery with Rayner working with the Disco crew and getting Book and Burnham out of the wormhole. But yeah, Rayner kind of, we do see vulnerable Rayner a lot lately. Now he's very uncomfortable being in command of the ship. But what do you think of how he handled himself?
Well, he actually is. He's definitely prick Rayner early on. He's like what does he do that? Like one sentence or less, or, tell me what's going
20
on.
words or less, or 20 words or fewer, I guess might be the right way to say that. But
Yeah, he's still
he's doing a bit of that
shit.
here.
He didn't want to hear Stamets and Adira like giving him any techno babble. He's like, just tell me what it is, and then he's just like, well, just do that. Just open up the aperture, and
I get it. Okay, more words.
Yeah, I'm like, that's some actual bad captaining. I think it may have served them well enough in the brutal post-burn era, but it definitely got to go now. But Stamets, who's certainly been a grumpy wild card in his times, was the one who reminded him of that he's not in this alone. Kind of said, he's like, oh, we're gonna back you. Kind of amusingly says, oh, it sounded better when you said it to him, and then he. But it does.
Yeah,
I think,
the actual line we should say is, "You're not in this alone."
You're not in this alone, right? And then I think it's kind of like helps him get to that place again. Seems like Stamets is a good influence on him. He represents a slightly older version of the crew, and he seems to be able to kind of pull him in line where, I think he's a little bit knee-jerk when he's talking to Tilly. When he's talking to Tilly, he kind of wants to fight her, at least in past episodes. But Stamets is a little bit closer to his generation, and so he can talk to him. Anyway, it gets him a little bit more chilled out, and he's able to find that his inner Burnham, I guess.
I love that he never sat in the captain's chair the entire episode.
That bit at the end where they're talking about that is really good.
Because that was Burnham's thing. Sonequa Martin Green actually never sits in the captain's chair until that moment at the end of season 3 when she becomes captain and sits in it for the first time.
Oh, wow, that's right.
But I like the brainstorming session and the Kelleran citric mash all around scene. I thought that was fun. It was a very Discovery scene, but it was also we got to see Rayner being functional Rayner within the Discovery ship, functioning as the Discovery ship.
We've seen those kind of idea sessions before on Discovery where, a lot of people are passing around an idea until they hit what they want. Kind of a quicker version of what they would do in TNG. And they actually do it pretty quick. So I'm sure, he was like, oh, shit. He's like, they actually can do 20 seconds or 20 words or less theories in a pinch. And so, yeah, he should be impressed. That's what Disco Crew does.
And it shows the benefits of them connecting, of them getting to know each other, because Burnham now knows a bit of Kelleran culture. Because she watched Kelleran Pulp Fiction, the movie that everyone has seen, that she's able to make the pop cultural reference that she knows Rayner will get with the tractor beam. So
Father, help me out here. I was not clear on something. I understood that she used that tractor beam to, I guess, announce she was coming through. But how did he know that the aperture needed to be ship-sized?
Because it was a tractor beam from a ship.
Okay. I mean, I guess, I feel like, I don't know. I guess that means you have to be pretty big to do a tractor beam. But do shuttles have tractor beams sometimes?
I think the actual beam was the diameter of a shuttle. So I think it'd be apparent that it's not coming from the shuttlecraft. Okay.
I wasn't real clear on that. I thought it'd be the code is going to be about how somebody in some Kelleran story.
It was just letting her know that it was her. The person that was talking to you about the Ballad of Kroll earlier today. I'm the one on the ship trying to get your attention.
Right. I think I wanted it to be a story about like, and that's when they returned with a dragon, and there's like, oh shit, we gotta make some room for the dragon. By the way, beautiful shot when it came out. It's all like angelic looking almost. You know, it looks like one of those Sistine Chapel clouds surrounding the ISS Enterprise as it comes out.
I thought the wormhole looked really good. I thought they did a really good job realizing it. I was kind of surprised that on the Tex-Trek first reaction stream last night, people kept making butthole jokes about it every time the wormhole was mentioned. But that did not occur to me when watching, but I guess it did to other people.
It was in the back of my head, and I have refrained because I'm a gentleman that way sometimes. But I did refrain.
Let's talk about our ending of the episode. There's that little walk and talk beat between Burnham and Rayner where they catch up for a little bit, and Burnham tells Rayner that he did a good job. And the line that you mentioned about the captain's chair is for the captain when she asked how did it feel to be back in the chair. But I like that shows Rayner has accepted his role and function as first officer. He's let go of his identity as a captain, and he now is there to be the XO to Burnham. And we had like a bit of that too when he said like, no, that's our captain. We're gonna get our captain out of the wormhole.
Yeah, I feel like when he talks, there's some nice nuance from the actor sometimes where I feel like there is a little tinge of regret, almost a little bit of like, I don't want to quite say feeling sorry for himself, but a little bit of regret. He's like, he's sort of like, my captain days are behind me. But like the way he delivers it isn't like not pathetic. There's a little bit of sadness I think behind it, or an acknowledgement maybe of like feels like there's a touch of pain, at least a little bit. And I'm liking all of his deliveries, his kind of measured deliveries on that. I think he's doing a good job. He's also on the actor is on the Ready Room this week. And he talks very articulately about how he built up the character and the small lore that they had to work with from DS9 and how that informed him and stuff like that. So if you're a fan of Rayner, as I am a fan of Rayner at this point, I like him. I'd highly recommend watching Ready Room.
And then we have a scene in Reds where Linus is playing the piano and Tilly and Stamets are talking about spirituality. What do you think of that bar conversation?
I'm curious to see where they want to go with it. Star Trek has touched on the spirituality often enough. Trek 5 is all about it, but it often comes into play. It's pretty rare, like Kira. it was like a defining element of her character. Worf. There's been many a character who's had spiritual dimensions to them. Spock does it. It seems to be coming out a little bit of nowhere for Culber, which is kind of a Discovery thing, but it sort of makes sense. He has had more like a notable number of sort of out of body moments and kind of extraordinary things.
He literally died. He just got possessed by an alien a couple episodes ago.
Now he's also a scientist, and I feel like it's like there are pretty good scientific explanations for both of those things. But it's another thing to experience him for himself. It seems like he grew up, with at least some cultural, spiritual background stuff going on. And so I kind of liked it. I'm curious. I like that he's excited about it, maybe enjoying a little bit of mystery and even just the idea of mystery, while at the same time he's like, oh, well, I don't know how to kind of square this with my husband, he's a data guy.
It sounds like Culber wants to like have fun believing in Santa Claus, and then Stamets is going to be the guy who's like, do you know how impossible it would be to deliver presents to every child in one night? It's like it sounds like they're in like that kind of dynamic with that.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting. Obviously, I like Tilly and Culber. That's a fun pairing we haven't seen in a bit. And I like her teasing it out of it. It's showing again her personal insight. Is she's real good at that kind of stuff. It's why she's going to be good at Starfleet Academy, and I think already is good at it at this point.
Cake is Eternal in our live audience is asking if the bar Reds is on Disco or at the HQ. And this is in the Discovery. It's actually the old transporter room set in real life, they just converted the transporter room set into a bar since they don't use the transporter room anymore with the portable transporters. I don't know if in universe, if it's like the same room, if the Discovery was like, we don't need this transporter room anymore. What should we do with it? And someone was like, let's set up a bar. Linus can play the piano in the corner. I don't know if it's supposed to be the same room, but it is definitely like on the ship.
Okay. Yeah.
The last moment, I guess this is funny. The episode is bookended with Book. He's in the first scene doing his log entries, and the last scene with Michael. Oh, that does show a bit of the thematic, maybe foreshadowing them getting back together. The episode opens up with Book in a room alone. It ends with him in a room with Burnham. So,
yeah, interesting catch there.
But we now have the third of the 5 puzzle pieces. And it came with a vial of blue liquid, which, much like the wormhole triggered the story of this episode, I'm sure the vial of blue liquid will trigger the story of next week's episode.
Yeah, no doubt. It's interesting that this was several of these episodes I think have ended on kind of what I feel like are kind of upbeat, searching notes. The excitement of the chase, the spiritual discovery that Culber is looking for. They're kind of maintaining a somewhat optimistic vibe, whereas I think
definitely. Well, that was Burnham's like thing in this scene, is that like maybe the lesson here is that you can shape your own future. Like the Mirror Universe people did. So it definitely ends on a very optimistic note.
But usually I think at this point in a Discovery season, we'd be hitting some episodes where it's like Quajon would have been blown up, or they're like showing how bad things have gotten.
Yeah, this is the mid-season finale. Just to compare to season 4, like at the mid-season finale of season 4, that was when Book ran off with Tarka.
Right. It's when you do a kind of a little cliffhanger, or a sort of a big cliffhanger, or show how dangerous things are. I'm appreciating the somewhat lighter tone. I definitely like that. Discovery has always been a little too quick to go to like threat level 20. So I'm feeling it.
And also Jill is pointing out, I said the words third of 5 a second ago, talking about like the puzzle pieces, and she says R.I.P. Hugh. I'm using the Borg name. But I don't have anything else on the episode before we go into the Gorn section. You have any final words on mirrors?
As I'm looking at my notes, the only thing that I wanted to mention was the two things. One thing I wrote down here, the Y hexagonal line from Rayner, and they say, and I think Stamets says, it doesn't matter, it'll work. I think that's a funny summation of Trek technobabble right there.
Yes.
Kind of meta. I loved it.
It's subtly meta, though.
What's that?
It was subtly meta.
Yes, I agree. It's actually something that both of those people would have said. And I also wanted to say that I am curious to know more about Dr. Cho, the junior science officer who became an
admiral.
An admiral.
Who I think is going to be part of the Section 31 made for streaming movie.
Yeah. I'm happy for the Mirror Universe refugees, and I would like to at some point know more about them. Whether it's a flashback story or what. But yes,
it would have been nice.
Lots of good energy at the end. Lots of good energy.
It would have been nice to have some of those flashbacks here, but I totally understand why you wouldn't want to do Breen flashbacks and Mirror Universe flashbacks both. This episode is already pretty clunky and convoluted. It definitely didn't need any more packed in.
I didn't actually have that reaction. I thought that it was like quite focused on Locke and Maul's backstory, and I am used to like a few BC plots going on Discovery. Like that's just normal for me.
Sure. And it definitely feels pretty graceful compared to past seasons, as I mentioned. But I think of this season, it did. Every other season felt like it had a lot of gracefulness to it and just flowed. And this one, it felt a little clunky and clumsy and awkward. But I still like.
Yeah, I agree that there was some clumsiness in there.
But I still liked the dance that it put on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do some Gorn eggs. Let's hatch them.
Sure. So this is where we like to talk about the Easter eggs, in jokes, and continuity connections in the episode we wanted to bring up. I should point out this episode was dedicated to the loving memory of Alan Red Morcetta. He was a set dresser on Star Trek Discovery. He died in a motorcycle accident in 2022, and I guess it's a safe bet now to assume the bar Reds is named in his honor. As the lead set dresser, maybe he was, behind converting it from a transporter room to a bar. This episode was largely about set dressing. It's like, hey, let's go across the street to Strange New World sets and redress it like the Mirror Universe to save money. So that's why it looks like the Strange New Worlds Enterprise and not like the TOS style from Mirror Mirror. But whatever you want to use to try to explain that, if it's refits or altering timelines, those pesky Romulans moving the eugenics war dates around, what else did they mess with? But
or you can be like me and not think about it at all and just say that's just how it's visualized now, and it was visualized differently in the 60s.
Yeah, that's also an option. In the opening title sequence of Star Trek Discovery, I haven't heard many people talk about this. I think it's because everyone besides me hits skip intro when they're watching TV. But they changed the puzzle piece animation in the intro. Originally, it was only like just that circle thing, and then they added the one piece going to it, and then now there's the last 2 episodes they had 2 pieces being plugged into it. So I'm guessing that next week's episode will open with the animation showing 3 of the 5 pieces coming together.
Yeah.
I like when TV shows change their opening week. Like, it goes back to also in the 60s, but Batgirl. You always knew if Batgirl was going to be in an episode of the Batman show, because they would show Batgirl in that animated opening thing if it was a Batgirl episode.
The X-Men 97 is doing a really good job with that right now too. So Game of Thrones did that. It would show you like what locations might be in the episode. So yeah, I like when shows do that. It's a fun thing. And in the era of streaming, we're seeing like good opening credit sequences make a return. TV with commercials was trying to get rid of those for years. They would just be like, just flash the title card. No one wants to watch a long intro sequence. They're going to change the channel if we do that. So, but on streaming, they do like the cool opening credit sequences. They also have like that infinity room thing that the Admiral gave Burnham in the first episode to transport to the infinity room to have the clandestine conversations with Kovich. I thought that was going to be like a bigger thing in the season and that we would see a lot more of Kovich. So it's kind of weird that didn't happen, but maybe Kovich will... gave her the little infinity symbol, right? Which I think just gets you into his holodeck or whatever.
Yeah, into whatever room they're talking in.
Because it was in the intro too, I was like, oh, this is gonna be a big thing. Not yet.
Yeah, not yet. I thought it was interesting when Book is flipping through the wanted posters for Maul in the opening of the episode, because we see that she's not only wanted in the Federation, but she's also wanted in the Orion Emerald Chain territory. There's like a new logo for the Emerald Chain now that I guess like they've separated from the Endorians, because she's also wanted by the Endorian Empire. There's the old school Endorian Empire logo from Enterprise from the 22nd century. I guess it's been like brought back in the 32nd century now that the Emerald Chain has started to break apart. So
I wonder if she set up some contracts with the Emerald Chain, and then when they went on the run, she's like, "See ya."
Now the Orions and Endorians are both after them. Makes me wonder if we'll see some Orion or Endorian action later in the season.
That'd be cool.
I guess Cardassian voles are pets now. Some people like to keep them as a pet. So I can't blame Tilly for not being thrilled to be around one. It does look like a very very ugly creature. There is a lot of fun stuff with the Mirror Universe Enterprise. I mentioned earlier, when Book asked, you have a meet the Terran version, or whatever he says of asking about Spock. But when Burnham says, I'm sure he's just as ruthless as the rest, that, as we know, the Mirror Universe Spock did become it sounds like what happened was whoever was Emperor post-Giorgio, commanded the Empire during Mirror, and then our Prime Universe Spock gave our Prime Universe Kirk gave Mirror Universe Spock a good enough speech that it inspired him to use the Tantalus field from that episode and defeat the Emperor, make himself High Chancellor, roll out a lot of reforms in the Empire, and then was driven out and had Action Saru had to take some of the refugees and flee. But I thought it was like really cool to use all of that stuff. And the Breen and the suits, you know, we've never seen an unmasked Breen before, but I do I don't know, I'm curious what happened in the Deep Space Nine episode Indiscretion. That's with Kira and Dukat rescuing Zial from that prison camp. Because in that episode, Kira and Dukat, they knock out, I assume like they stun two Breen and take their suits off and wear them. So I'm thinking the Breen are so secretive, they probably, during the 24th century, they probably had like another suit they wore under their like outer armor. So, because Kira and Dukat don't seem to know what Breen look, you know, they never tell anyone that they're like goo people. No one else seems to know that, so. But I haven't seen anyone else point that out. But yeah, like I always say, like Kira and Dukat have undressed Breen at some point.
I wonder if they were like if they're particularly gooey when they're like say knocked out, and she was just like, I don't know what this shit is, and like, you know,
just like sprayed it out with a water hose.
Maybe.
Yeah, and just put on the suit.
But it might mean that, like, yeah, she reported that there was a green substance in there to the Federation, but I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
I like my idea better, that they just had, like, another suit that they wear under their outer suit, and that's why Dukat and Kira didn't see them.
Or maybe Dukat and Kira are secretly on the Breen payroll for long-term stuff.
Well, the Breen are pretty secretive, so... and I thought this was an interesting reference, but they had the rubidium mines. Rubidium is from Patterns of Force, the Nazi planet episode of the original series. That was the little transponders that they plant in Spock and Kirk's arms, and then they had to take them out, and Spock was able to, in a very contrived, convenient way, use them to form a laser to blast their way out of the prison cell that they're in by melting the lock on the door. So this wasn't
like that.
This wasn't the first episode of Star Trek to use some contrivances like that. And then we get to hear Book say "hit it" like Pike when they're or like he's asking Burnham, I guess, like, do you want to use "hit it" as your catchphrase because we're on the Strange New World sets? She's like, no, that sounds weird. Let's just fly. So we have the Strange New Worlds reference. I don't know why Book knows what Pike said. I guess Burnham had, you know, that year they worked together, they had a lot of conversations about.
Yeah.
To be fair, that would have been very recent. Like for Burnham, they'd be like, yeah, like last week I was on a shit with a guy who said "hit it" all the time. So
it's true.
Yeah, so he totally would have heard about that. Makes sense now that I say it out loud. And one other thing I wanted to mention is that the Yod Thought is what the Primarch called them. They were the Yod Thought bloodline. Thought is a Breen term from Deep Space Nine. There is a Breen commander named Thought Gore, who is kind of like the head Breen, who is in like all those meetings with Wei-Yun and the Founder on Cardassia Prime. His name was Thought Gore, so I always took it to mean like that was like the equivalent of an admiral or general is a thought. Mm-hmm. You know, like the word "thought" has like a different meaning on the internet lately.
It does.
But I first heard it in the 90s on Deep Space Nine. And then, of course, we had a 47 in this episode, Ballad of Kroll, Section 4, Verse 7. But that's when Kroll had to summon his war brothers with the drum beats. And that's all I got on the episode, but we do like to hear what other people think. Y'all just heard Dave and I talk about this episode for an hour and a half, so please comment to give us your thoughts and opinions on Mirrors. You can comment on YouTube, you can sound off in the Tex-Trek Discord server, or reply to my tweets. Dave has some subspace transmissions we received on last week's episode, Face the Strange, and that was a really fun one, you know, with the timey-wimey stuff going on. So, Dave, what are people saying about Face the Strange?
Yeah, and that had, like, Burnham meeting herself, all of that stuff. Okay, so over on, let's see, I think on Twitter, Rick Garrett said, loved it, might be my fave Discovery episode. Sohail, our own Starfleet Sohail, then Action Sohail, said, I think this will be one of my favorite episodes of Discovery. It was a really cool way of giving us a retrospective show without it being a clip episode. I'm really going to miss this team of performers and characters. Everyone's on fire. Belena said, I missed Lorca, and had like a little heartbreak emoji. And Geek in Review said, it felt like a good Trek episode, but it also should have happened in season 2 or 3. Classic time jump, but skipped a few beats. Let's see. Over on Discord, Joel said they're going to get progenitor tech and pay off Jabba's bounty on their heads. That's... you know what? Maybe I was looking at that might have been for this episode, or maybe he intuited that. But I might have looked at the wrong one. But yes, there's a little bit of Han Solo in there too. On Facebook, Jay Stevens said this was without a doubt the best episode of Discovery. It felt fresh but classic Trek. It also delved into the relationships and telling stories about its people. The stakes felt high. Everything clicked in this episode. So several people in there mentioning it as a particular favorite, and a few citing that classic TOS vibe, which is something that I remember was bouncing around in my head too. But yeah, I think that's all I've got for this week. Oh, sorry, Father, you're on mute.
That's a fun thing to end on, because Michelle Paradise gave us a tease for next week's episode, as she did for every episode of the season. And on season 5, episode 5, Whistle Speak, Michelle Paradise said, "Oh, classic TOS style adventure." So,
very interesting. More TOS vibes. Are they going to go to a planet? Is there going to be
I think it's going to be like a planet of the week. I think it's going to be planet of the week is what she means by that. So.
I love an away mission.
Yeah, so we saved some money this week by staying on sets. Next week, let's drive the actors out to a location and shoot some planet stuff. I'm ready for it. And I look forward to talking about it with y'all then. We'll be live Friday night with the deep dive discussion, where you can listen later wherever you get your podcast. But please subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss Rachel's first reaction streams on Thursdays. Those have been a lot of fun. And until next time, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.